Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit different from what we usually do. We love the Sur Ron, but there are definitely some things we think should have been done differently. For each of these things, we're going to cover why we think the designers did what they did, and what we think they should have done instead. We pretty much only ride these things off-road, so if you like riding the Sur Ron on-road, you probably won't agree with us, and that's okay. This is just our opinion. And as two engineers, we often see everywhere that there's a disconnect between the people designing a product, the people making it, and the people who use it. In the case of the Sur Ron, I don't think the designers anticipated the magnitude of use that the Sur Ron now sees, so we're going to cut them a little bit of slack.
Without further ado, here are the 5 things that we would change, and we'll leave timestamps so you can go to each one if you want to hear more about it. So the first one is the width of the trailing arm. The second is the overall size of the bike. The third is reducing the complexity of the drivetrain. 4 is the swing arm pivot is too far forward and causes your ankles to rub on the side. And 5 is a lot of the components need to be replaced before riding. So starting with the width of the trailing arm, this is probably the biggest gripe with the bike. They did this because they wanted to make it big enough to fit the size of tire that the bike came with. They most likely put a cheap 70/100 by 19 tire on to achieve low cost, low weight, and low rolling resistance to maintain a good range on the bike. This is also suggestive of the type of terrain they expected riders to be on. The size of the stock tire is insufficient for the power that the motor provides. We get that this bike blurs the lines between a mountain bike, a road bike, and a dirt bike, but for the rims and the trailing arm, it needs to be more like a dirt bike. At the end of the day, it needs a trailing arm that can accommodate at least a 110 by 90 by 19 rear tire. There is virtually no downside to a wider trailing arm as there is minimal weight gain and it allows for more tire options down the road, but you can still run the road tires if you want.
The next thing we hate is the overall size of the bike. In the design phase, every engineer needs to consider ergonomics and what bike sizing will fit the most people. This being a Chinese bike, the ergonomics definitely reflect that market. The average height of a male in China is 5 foot 6 inches, while the average height of an American male is 5 foot 9 inches. Obviously, it was being designed for the market that it was developed in, and they probably never anticipated such a huge use in other countries. This makes sense, especially if you throw in the fact that they were probably trying to keep the bike at a low weight. All that being said, we would still like to change it. We're about 5'10 and 5'11, and the bike felt too small for us initially, and our knees would hit the bars when we turn hard in a corner, and we can flat foot the bike easily where we would rather have more ground clearance. Right away, we needed to put riser bars and multiple spacers in just to make it feel comfortable when riding. When you put a larger dude on it, especially over 6 feet, it almost looks comical how small the bike is for them. It's really easy to drop the forks down in the triple clamp, cut out some foam of the seat and put in a lowering linkage to lower the bike, but it's basically impossible to make the bike any bigger. On top of that, the wheelbase of the bike needs to be a tad bigger as well. On flat ground, this does make it playful to do wheelies, but once you start going up real hills and make some real upgrades like a sprocket, controller, and battery, you're going to wish it was easier to keep the front end down when you attack those steep hills.
The next thing we would change is the fact that the swing arm pivot is set too far forward and it rubs on your ankles. At this point we're getting a little nitpicky, but this one is super annoying. This is one of the parts of the bike that I truly don't know what they were thinking. The way that they made the swing arm in relation to the foot peg makes it a near certain that your boots are going to rub the paint off the swing arm. This could have been solved in so many different ways, and it appears to just be a design oversight. Long story short, we would change it, and there is no good way to fix it. We have tried helicopter tape over the powder coat, and it's too hard to tape off the odd geometries of the swing arm effectively, and it comes off while riding, and that doesn't really look that good. We really just wish they would have done a bit better of a job of mitigating this issue before they went to large-scale production.
The next thing we're going to talk about is how a lot of the components need to be replaced before doing any serious riding. So the components that we're referring to here are the brake pads, tires, tubes, grips, stem, foot pegs, and the fork being pretty garbage. Obviously, the reason they did this is to keep the cost down. It doesn't take a scientist to figure that out. Personally, we would rather have a slightly higher price point or the option to purchase a nicer model with better components if it meant we didn't have to spend a couple $100s and a couple hours of work just to get the bike where it should be from the factory. This would also be very easy for the factory because they can source the better parts in bulk and just pass along the cost to the customer, and everybody wins.
Alright, the fifth and final thing we would change is the fact that it uses a primary and secondary drivetrain. The reason we don't like having two drivetrains is because it creates another point of failure, increases complexity and number of components, and it makes things difficult to work on. That being said, I will give it to them for thinking outside the box. It's a smart shortcut to eliminating varying chain tension through the stroke of the suspension, which is nice when you're riding. This one is interesting for us as engineers because there isn't any clear or easy fix. There are two other routes they could have gone, however. The first is they could have done it like a dirt bike, where the pinion is close to the swing arm pivot, but not totally concentric. This would remove a set of gears and a belt, as well as move the motor backwards, creating more battery space, and again, this is the standard for how most dirt bikes do it. The second and nicer option, and what we would have liked to have seen personally, but understand it's not exactly an easy thing to pull off, is a concentrically mounted motor like the ones you would see on a zero bike. This is proprietary motor technology, but if done correctly, I think this could be a big win. It makes it so that the chain tension does not change through the stroke, makes it much easier to raise the ground clearance near the front of the bike, and makes for more room for battery space. It reduces components and is an elegant solution in the progression of electric motor technologies. The downsides would be that at a certain point the diameter of the motor would reduce ground clearance, so it is possible that they'd be limited to motor size. If they could make it work with similar power levels though, it would be next level shit. They would also probably need to have a beefy skid plate to protect the underside of the exposed motor. But executed properly, we think that it could work great on a dirt bike.
Alright, that's the 5 things that we hate about the Sur Ron and that we change. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you guys liked it. We got the hoodies up on the website with a restock coming in soon. And if you like this video, please hit that like button and also consider subscribing to the channel if you would like to see more content like this. Is that it?
You're supposed to have a nice day.
Have a nice day.